Good morning. Today we are doing lesson 5.1, which is writing linear equations in slope-intercept form. So we have seen this before. We did this on lesson 4.5 as well. However, we're going to be adding some more to it today. So first, it says use slope and y-intercept to write an equation. Like we've identified before, m is our slope, how we move, and b is our y-intercept, usually where we begin on our y-axis. So first it says our slope is 8, so our slope is 8, and our y-intercept, where we're crossing our y-axis, is really our b. We can write an equation in the form y equals mx plus b. So it would be y equals m, which is our slope, which is 8, x, and then plus b, or minus b. In this case, b is a negative, so instead of a plus, it's really just going to be a minus, and b is 7, so negative 7. Let's do the same thing over here. Y equals mx plus b. Well, our slope is 3 over 4. So we have 3 over 4x plus b. B is our y-intercept, which is 3. So if they give you your slope and your y-intercept, all you have to do is write the equation. If they give you a picture instead of an m and a b, you can still write the equation. We just need to find our slope by counting rise over run. And then b, which is our y-intercept, we're looking at where does it cross the y-axis. So our y-axis is this line. Ooh, that was not straight. There we go. Right there. So let's identify both of those things. First, I'm going to count my slope just by counting, like I said, rise over run, up and down first, and then left to right. I like to start on the left, but it really doesn't matter which point you start at. So rising first, I'm going to rise 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm rising 4. Remember, slope's always written as a fraction, and then we're running 1, 2, 3, 4 over 3. If you started here instead, you would just have gone down negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4. And over to the left is also negative 1, negative 2, negative 3. Two negatives would have made a positive like we have here. So we have our slope, which is, if we write this in our equation, y equals 4 over 3. X, and then plus b or minus b, depending on if it's positive or negative. Here's our y-axis that I've highlighted, and we're starting at, I'm going to erase this so we can see. Oopsies, too much erased. We want to see our y-axis, that's it. So when we look at this, from our origin, we're going to count down negative 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're crossing the y-axis at negative 5. Same thing on this one. First, I'm going to find my slope from this point to this point. I'm going down, or negative 1, negative 2. And I'm going over 1, 2, 3, 4. 2 over 4 is a nice slope. However, we can simplify it by dividing by 2. And we get a slope of, oops, we'll go back to red here. 2 divided by 2 is 1, so negative 1 over 4 divided by 2, which is 2. So negative 1/2. So starting to write our equation, y equals m, which is our slope, negative 1 over 2, x, and then plus or minus b. And here is where our blue line crosses our y-axis. We cross at a positive 1, so plus 1. Next, we are going to write an equation of the line that passes through the given points. So we're still writing an equation in the form y equals mx plus b. We just need to find m and find b based on the information that they give us. So first, here are some questions to help guide our journey to finding this equation. So first it says, what are the 2 points? And our 2 points, I'm not going to relist them because they're right there. I'm just going to label them as x's and y's, because eventually the next step is just finding the slope. So this is my first point, they get 1s. This is my second point, they get 2s. Reminder, there's a poster on the wall, or you can write it down right now. Our formula for finding slope with 2 points is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So I'm going to plug in my numbers. It says y2, which is 1, minus, right here, y1, which is 5, divided by, and then on the bottom, x2, which is 1.5, minus x1, which is 0. Well, 1 minus 5, there's more negatives, would be a negative 4. And 1.5 minus nothing is still 1.5. So now, I don't really like a decimal in my fraction, so we can't really simplify this nicely, but I can get rid of this 1/2. To get rid of a half, we could actually double this. So instead of dividing to simplify, we could multiply. It'll still give us the same fraction, but negative 4 times 2 is negative 8. 1.5 times 2 would give us 3. So we can leave this as 8 over 3 as a fraction, as our slope, because we like slope as a fraction. If you wanted to convert it to a decimal, you could, but if we had to graph it, that'd be difficult then. So this is new. It says, what is the y-intercept? Now on a graph, if we looked at a graph, we'd be looking at our y-axis. So it also says when x is 0. When we found our x-intercepts and our y-intercepts when we graphed, our x-intercept, y was 0, and our y-intercept, x was 0. So our y-intercept is really when x is 0. So we could look at our points here to see if either of them have an x where it's 0. Because this point 0 up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is where our graph would start. And then our graph would move in some direction. So we can look for a point, we call this point 0, b, because the other number next to it tells us what our b is, or our y-intercept. So we have the point 0, 5 right here. So our b, or our y-intercept, is really just 5. So when x is 0, the other number tells us our y-intercept, 5. So our equation would be y equals m, which is our slope, which we found right here, negative 8 over 3, x, and then plus b, and b is 5. There's our first equation. Let's try the same thing again right here. What are our 2 points? I'm going to label them x, y first point, x, y second point, and then find my slope. Again, our slope formula is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So first, y2, which is negative 2, minus y1, which is 0. And then on the bottom, x2, which is 0, minus x1, which is a negative 1. Those two negatives make a positive. Negative 2 minus nothing is still negative 2. 0 plus 1 is 1. Because this would just be a nice number, 2 divided by 1 is 2, and it's negative. So you could leave it as a fraction if you want it, or you could convert it to just a nice number. And then our y-intercept. Well, our y-intercept is when x is 0, or we're looking for 0, b, our y-intercept. So this point does not have a 0 for x, so it can't be that point. This one does. So this is our point that we're looking for, 0, negative 2. So our b is really a negative 2. So our equation would read y equals negative 2, because that's our slope, and in the form y equals mx plus b, negative 2x, and then plus or minus b, b is negative 2, so it's a minus 2. Now this one is the same thing, however it looks a little different. Remember we learned f of x is a fancy way of saying y? Well, that's all we have here. We have our x and then our y. Because they're telling us if we plug something in for x, we will get out y, whatever y is equal to. So this is really x, and this is really y. So we need to label our points x1, y1, and x2, y2. So if you wanted to label your points as 4, 17, and 0, 5, you could. Writing them out like this might help you to find your slope or to label your points. So let's plug it into our equation, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So first, y2 is 5 minus y1, which is 17. Then on the bottom, x2, which is 0, minus x1, which is 4. Well, 5 minus 17, there's more negatives. Well, 17 minus 5 is 12, so negative 12. 0 minus 4 is still a negative 4. When I divide here, two negatives make a positive, and 12 divided by 4 is 3. So there's our slope, m. And then our y-intercept. We're looking for that point 0, b. Because this is our x and our y. So when x is 0, y will tell us our y-intercept. So this point doesn't have a 0 in it, but the second one does. This point here is 0, comma b, 0, 5. So b is 5. So let's write it in our equation. Y equals mx plus b. So m is 3 plus b, which is 5. I would like for you to try this next one on your own, and then click play to see if you got the right answer. So our points, what are our 2 points? My 2 points are x and y here, so this point would be 0, negative 2, and the second point would be 8, 4. They're in the same order that they're given, it just looks different than an ordered pair. Don't let that confuse you, okay? As a reminder, this is really just f of x equals y. So this is x. So I'm going to label my points x, y first point, x, y second point, and plug it in. So y2 is 4 minus y1, which is negative 2. Those two negatives make a positive. Then on the bottom, x2, which is 8, minus x1, which is 0. So we have 4 plus 2 is 6. 8 minus nothing is still 8. But we can simplify this. I know I can divide these both by 2. And that will give me 3 over 8 divided by 2, which is 4. And then next, looking for our y-intercept, looking for where x is a 0. Well, this first point right here, we have x is 0. So that point is 0, negative 2. So our b is negative 2. Our y-intercept is negative 2. So our equation, y equals mx plus b. So m is 3/4 x. Don't forget the x. Some people are forgetting their x. And minus 2. This is in the equation slope-intercept form or function form, whatever you'd like to call it. They all mean the same thing. Alright, next, a couple word problems. It says a cable company charges $44 per month for basic service. Each premium channel costs an additional $16 per month. Write an equation, so we can assume that they're asking for y equals mx plus b. Write an equation that gives the total cost in dollars of cable each month as a function of the number of premium channels. Function is another way of saying function form, which is solving for y, which that is. So we need to figure out our slope, m. Our slope is how we're moving on our graph, or what's changing, not changing, what's happening over and over and over again. So on our slope, remember when we graph slope, we go rise over run, plot a point, rise over run, plot a point, rise over run, plot a point. That's what we're doing over and over and over again. Or what you're getting charged over and over and over again, every single month. And our B tells us where to begin. What's our flat fee to begin with? Where are we starting at? So first, where are we beginning at? I like to start with B, going in alphabetical order here. We begin by being charged $44 a month per basic service. And then each channel costs, every single channel you get will cost $16. So our 44 is really our B. And each additional channel, because they're asking us based on the number of premium channels we're getting, that's 16 times over and over and over again for every channel we get. So y equals 16x plus 44. Now this is new. It says identify the dependent and independent variables in this situation. Well, our dependent and independent variables are x or y, but to determine these, it's easy on this one with our independent variable because it's usually what we're plugging in to our equation. Normally when we plug things into our equation, if we're going to graph it, we plug things in for x. So x is our independent variable. That leaves y as our dependent variable. So if we think about this, x would be representing how many months, because we're being charged $16 every month. So our x is our independent variable because I could choose as many channels as I want. I get to choose it. I'm independently choosing how many channels I want. That means my cost, what I get out, or y, so my cost, this would be the channels. The cost is dependent on what I plug in, how many channels I get. So I don't really get to choose y. It depends, or is dependent on what I plug in. So then it says explain how you can use the equation from part A, so right here, to approximate or estimate how many premium channels you can have for $80 a month. So we want to know how many channels for $80 a month. Well, channels is our x-axis, or sorry, our independent variable, x. So that means our total cost would be y. So we're going to plug 80 in for y and solve it. So 80 equals, and then it says 16x plus 44. So solving this, just a regular two-step equation. Get rid of your addition or subtraction first. Remember, we're just doing the order of operations backwards. First get rid of addition and subtraction, then multiplication and division. So I'm going to subtract 44. So we have 16x, and this should leave me with 36. You can use a calculator if you need to. And then last, the opposite of multiplying is divide. So I'm going to divide both sides by 16. In my calculator, 36 divided by 16 gives me 2.25. But if we think about it, x is the number of channels. Can we have 0.25 of a channel? Well, I don't think so. So we can't get more than 2.25 because we only have $80. So we would have about, which is why it says approximate, about 2 channels. We can only get 2 channels, 2 premium channels. You got to pick your favorites. And our last problem. In a recording studio, it says a recording studio charges musicians an initial fee. Initial fee would be like a one-time fee of $50 to record an album. Studio time costs an additional $35 per hour. So part A says write an equation that gives the total cost of an album as a function of studio time. So equation and function, that's function form telling us y equals mx plus b. And then part B, we're going to find the total cost of an album that takes 10 hours of studio time to create. So first, we have 2 numbers. One of them is our slope, and one of them is our y-intercept, or b. Well, this initial fee is only $50. That's a one-time fee, so that 50 is going to be our beginning cost, or our y-intercept, where are we starting. And then our studio time costs $35 per hour. That's going to be our m, our slope, whatever we're doing over and over and over and over and over again, how we're moving on our graph. Every single time we're going up $35. So our equation would be y equals our m, which is our slope, 35x, plus b, which is $50. Next, part B, It says find the total cost of recording an album that takes 10 hours of studio time. So our hours, we are being charged $35 per hour. So that we are plugging into our equation. That's our independent variable. We're choosing to spend $10 hours of our time. So we're plugging that in for x. So we would have y equals 35 times 10 and then plus 50 to figure out y, which is going to be our total cost. So we can solve this without using a calculator. 35 times 10, just add a 0. That would give us 350. And 350 plus 50 would equal a nice 400. And we're talking about money, so we can put a dollar sign on there. It would cost us $400 to spend 10 hours in the studio. And I did give you some clues here along the way if you got stuck. It says think, what doesn't change and what does change? What are you trying to find? So we established we're trying to find an equation. And what doesn't change? Well, this $50 isn't going to change. It's a one-time fee. So that's where you're going to start on your graph if we were to graph it. And then our M is what's changing or what's happening over and over and over again. We're charging $35 every 1 hour, up $35 every hour. So this would be like 1 hour, 2 hour, if they asked us to graph it. And we would go up 35 each time. Your homework is out of the book, so please make sure you write this down, put your name at the top of the assignment, and this information along with your hour. Good luck!